Hey guys, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, bringing to you another edition of the Crisis on Infinite Earths review series, and today I'm going to be talking about Part 4 of the Crisis event, which is Episode 8 of Arrow. Now, as we saw in Part 3 of the Crisis event, we were treated to a hilarious cameo from Lucifer in Earth 666, and Tom Ellis and Matt Ryan, in my opinion, absolutely knocked that scene right out of the park. I thought their Constantine and their Lucifer's interaction with each other was so funny. Tom Ellis was at his absolute campy best as Lucifer Morningstar, and Matt Ryan was cool as a cat, as always, as John Constantine. We were also introduced to Ryan Choi, who, as we all know, is destined to become the next Atom, and he was recruited by the heroes to help save the multiverse. And we were also treated to Black Lightning finally making his Arrowverse debut, as we got to see him interact with the other heroes. And I like the way how they tied everything together, because we saw in an episode of Black Lightning where he disappeared as all of his family and friends were wiped out by anti-wave matter, and I like the way that he was teleported by the Pariah to help the others. So very genius move and very clever way of bringing these guys all together. And we also got to see Kingdom Come Superman sadly wiped out, thanks to Lex Luthor, who swapped places with him and made himself a Paragon, which in my opinion was a very shocking but douchey move on the part of Lex Luthor. And we also saw the Anti-Monitor take control of Lila Michaels' body and wiped out all of the remaining heroes and people, and the Pariah teleported the remaining heroes to the vanishing point, which is where Part 3 of the Crisis was left off. So overall, I would have to say that Part 3 of the Crisis was fantastic, and I'm very curious to see how Part 4 will play out. So with that all said, let's get right into it. Let's talk about Part 4 of Crisis on Infinite Earths, Episode 8 of Arrow. We are taken 10,000 years into the past in Mountus, where we see Marnovu is with his wife as he is suiting up and is getting ready to travel to the dawn of time. He affectionately calls her the Monitor as she's monitoring his time travel. He steps into the portal and arrives at the dawn of time, but he learns that something goes horribly wrong as the antimatter begins to corrupt the temporal zone. A hole in the universe is created, and Marnovu ends up being sent to a different universe altogether, the anti-universe, which as a result helps create the anti-monitor. Now, this is the first time we actually get to see Marnovu's backstory, and you remember in previous parts of the Crisis he mentions that he had a wife, so this is the first time that that story and his wife is actually officially addressed. And I thought this was a very good scene, and we get to learn exactly why Marnovu is the way he is and how he became the Monitor. And as he speaks through the speaker comms, he apologises to his wife, saying that because of his ambition he has subsequently doomed all of them. So that was a great scene and a very cool way to open up the fourth part of the Crisis event, in my opinion. We are then taken to the vanishing point, and months have passed, and the Paragons are struggling with the stark reality of their situation, that everyone saved for them is dead. Ryan Choi writes a letter to his now deceased wife to give them some semblance of comfort. He explains how he just don't see why he was chosen as a Paragon. He then goes on to explain how the so-called Paragon of Destiny doesn't even believe in tomorrow anymore, and that the Paragon of Courage spends every day working herself to be the bone, training for a fight that will never come. And then there's the Paragon of Honor, who just meditates for hours and hours on end. Dr. Choi goes further, writing that the Paragon of Hope has lost hers, and as for him, he spends his days trying to repurpose that broken technology lying around this place, trying in vain to find a way out. In his letter, he also says he doesn't have the nicest things to say about Lex Luthor, who used the Book of Destiny to rewrite reality and take the place of Clark Kent of Earth 96, the real paragon of truth. Ryan also goes on to say there are lots of ways to describe Lex Luthor, but he personally finds douchebag to be the most descriptive. Nice. He finishes his letter by saying that as for Barry Allen, aka The Flash, the paragon of love, has just gone missing. So this was a very good scene as we got to see Ryan Troy basically describing everybody's moods around them in the aftermath of what's happened. So I think in due time he'll grow to be a good hero, but at the moment it's very hard to take him seriously because he doesn't actually have any special powers or any gadgets. So time will tell how his character will develop, but he's off to a good start. We also see Lex and Ryan reveal to the other Paragons that they've come up with a teleportation device, and Supergirl volunteers Lex to try it out. But it doesn't work. Lex Luthor admits that we have a long shot, but it was worth a try. I think it's quite interesting, as I've said in previous parts, that even though Lex Luthor is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest villains in the world, I like the fact that even in times of dire situations, they reluctantly rely on his help, because whether they like Lex Luthor or not, and they don't, they need his help to survive, and with his technology and his scientific mind, they might have a shot at survival. So it's good to see that they reluctantly have no choice but to trust Lex Luthor. Shortly after, Barry returns and looks to be very disoriented. Kate tells him that he's been gone for months. Barry is shocked to learn that because of him, he's felt like he's been gone for 2 seconds. And he tells him that there's no way out of here, and not even the Speed Force can get them out of there. And we also see Barry Allen starts to crack up. And one thing I have to give Grant Gustin credit, he's very good at playing scenes where he goes mad. It's not something we see very often in shows, but when we do, it's always a lot of fun. And to see him going absolutely off his head, which is understandable, was a lot of fun. And it's really good that all of the heroes were the ones trying to calm him down, because he's usually the one who consoles everyone. So it was kind of a nice switch to see everybody consoling Barry Allen for a change, even though he's going absolutely bonkers at this point. So props to Grant Gustin. We are then taken back to Purgatory, where we see Oliver is still with Jim Corrigan, aka the Spectre, and Oliver relives all of his greatest fights with some of his biggest enemies, including Malcolm Merlyn, Ra's al Ghul, and Damien Darhk. We also see Oliver's eyes begin to flash a bright green, and a moment later Jim asks him, "What do you see?" And Oliver, in a very deep voice, says, "I see everything." So this looks like the moment that Oliver Queen has now officially become the Spectre. Jim explains that every punch Oliver threw, every kick he landed, and every arrow he fired all led him to this point, to this very moment, the ultimate fight. He goes on to explain that the Anti-Monitor is more than just the Monitor's adversary, but rather is the being that stands between all that ever was and all that will ever be. Jim describes the Anti-Monitor as the apocalypse itself, given life and form and a terrible purpose. He goes on to also tell Oliver that in order to defeat the Anti-Monitor, he is going to need some help, and the two of them go off to meet the Paragons. This scene was actually a lot of fun to watch. It was really cool to see Oliver relive all of his greatest battles, from his wars with Deathstroke to Malcolm Merlyn to Damien Darhk and Ra's al Ghul, among others. So in my opinion, this was a nice treat and a nice little trip down memory lane, and it really shows you how much Arrow as a show has changed. It's gone from being a very ground-based kind of show, and they slowly started incorporating lots of supernatural elements to the show, and it's gone through a lot of changes, and it's really cool to see how far the show has come. And you know, with Oliver now becoming the Spectre, it's really brought everything full circle in my opinion. So this was a real nice treat for hardcore Arrow fans, like myself included. So this was really good, and I really enjoyed this a lot. We then go back to the vanishing point, where we see Kara is telling Barry that he needs to rest since he's not looking too good, but Barry being very distraught, saying that he can't and that he needs to go to the Speed Force again. Sarah then tells Barry that it's a bad idea and that the effort alone could kill him. Barry refuses to listen to anyone and says that anything is better than staying here at the vanishing point. You can clearly see that Barry is not handling this very well, and he starts to slowly go mad. And Kate also interjects and says that they're not going to let him kill himself, but a distraught Barry tells her to get out of his way. Sarah doesn't budge and tells Barry that they aren't letting him go anywhere in the condition that he's currently in, and manages to push him back. An angry Barry taunts Sarah, asking her to try and stop me, to which Sarah replies that in the current condition he is in, it wouldn't be that hard. So you can clearly see that being stuck in the vanishing point is just driving Barry mad, and the fact that they've lost everybody in the multiverse is quite a bitter pill for him to swallow. So this was a really cool, emotional scene. Unable to take the fighting any longer, Kara tells the other two heroes to cut it out because whatever is going to happen won't include them turning on each other. You go, Supergirl, you tell them. Kara tries to reason with Barry, saying that maybe, just maybe, the Speed Force is their last hope, and at that moment we see Oliver appear in full Spectre form at the vanishing point and tells him that the Speed Force is in fact the key to saving everybody. The heroes are surprised to see Oliver, and he explains his new situation as the Spectre, to which Sarah replies, "Oliver, is that you?" And Oliver says yes and no in a very deep voice. He explains that he is Oliver Queen, but he has become something more. When Barry asks for clarification, Oliver replies by saying that some may call him a ghost or a spectre that is attuned to the entire multiverse. And I like the line that Ryan Choi says, "Cool, I like it. Very Sith." Nice little pop culture reference to the Sith Lord of Star Wars. Oliver confirms that the multiverse is gone and that the antimatter universe waits to replace it. Oliver reveals to the Paragons that the Anti-Monitor is the dawn of time, trying to make his antimatter universe permanent, and that they need to go and stop him. He also warns that the Anti-Monitor is extremely powerful and that the 8 of them might not be enough to put a stop to him. They need a backup plan, to which turns out to be they need to split up. Some of them will go to the dawn of time, while the others will go to Maltus to try and stop Marnavu from unintentionally creating the breach that started it all from ever happening in the first place. Barry asks Oliver that if being attuned to the entire multiverse also includes him being attuned to the Speed Force. Oliver says yes, but warns Barry that it is very dangerous. But Barry tells his friends that he needs a boost because everyone's lives depends on it. Oliver then touches Barry's forehead and says that it is done, that he needs to use this newfound power with caution. Oliver asks Barry if he trusts him, to which Barry asks him if he really is Oliver Queen. Oliver answers by simply saying yes, so Barry nods and says, "I trust Oliver with every cell of my body." Oliver then tells Barry to run, and he ends up in the Speed Force. This was quite a cool moment, seeing Oliver in a dark green robe, very similar to the Spectre from the comic books, and his skin was a little bit pale. I mean, I would have liked to have seen a proper, full Spectre form, but I'm happy with what we got. I'm quite happy with what we got, and with that beard and the dark green robe over his head, he really looks like a Sith Lord from Star Wars. So yeah, this was a really cool moment, and in a way, Oliver is the one that started all this in the first place, going back to season 1. He's been the catalyst for this entire thing that we know as the Arrowverse. So to see him now as the Spectre, as I said earlier, brings everything full circle. So this was a really cool scene. I really enjoyed this a lot. We then see Kara, Ryan and Lex end up on Mountis, and she tells Ryan to focus when he wonders why the alien planet doesn't look alien enough. You know, Ryan's got a lot to learn and he's going to see a lot of crazy stuff before it's all said and done. Kara says they need to look for Marnovu, and it's not like they can do an internet search on him. True, that is very, very true. Ryan says that maybe they can and points to the city in the distance. He goes on to say that any city that large has to be bureaucracy, and bureaucracies require some form of central databank to function. So if they find that, they may find Marnovu. Around that same time, Ryan is coming up with a plan to find Marnovu, but Lex Luthor, being Lex Luthor, disappears. You know, even though Lex is actually working with the heroes, you know, he still has his own agenda. You know, he still wants to be ruler of the world because Lex has such a big ego. He can't bear the thought of a universe where he's not part of it, and he's got nothing to do. So it's kind of funny to see Lex just say, you know what, screw you guys, I'm going to do my own thing. So we got to see that yet again. Meanwhile, we see Barry is running through the Speed Force and the anti-monitor hand is reaching through it and looks to be very close to catching Barry, but he narrowly manages to avoid being caught. However, Barry gets separated from Oliver and the other Paragons and runs headlong into some boxes. Once he takes a closer look, he finds the Queen Consolidated logo on them. Now, for anyone who wonders why Barry has ended up here, this was back in Season 2 of Arrow, where we were introduced to Barry Allen. Now, when Barry Allen first made his appearance in Arrow, Season 2, he appeared for 2 episodes, but he wasn't the Flash yet. He didn't get his speed, so this scene was kind of like a callback to his first appearance. So it was kind of cool that we got to revisit that scene again, and we then see his own voice apologising to Oliver, Felicity and the others for being late, just like in the first appearance that we see him in. We then see Oliver wearing a dark suit, just like in his Season 2 appearance, and tells Barry that he is still in the Speed Force. And Oliver explains to them that the anti-monitor attacked them, and as a result, they all got separated. He adds that this includes him too, and he's somewhere in the Speed Force as well, using various pieces of his essence to keep himself, Sarah, Jean together. Oliver also adds that there are few things more powerful in the universe than memory and connection. So he's using their memories of their friends and closest allies to keep all of them from falling out of the Speed Force. Because if they do fall out of the Speed Force, they will be consumed by antimatter, just like everybody else before them. Oliver also explains that he can buy Barry some time, but he needs to get to each of them before it's too late. Barry argues that the Speed Force is infinite and he wouldn't know where to look. Oliver tells him before he disappears to remember what he just said about memories and connections. He also goes on to say that he needs to take into account their greatest victories, the most crushing defeats, and the moments when the bonds between them were forged. This was a very good scene. So even though Oliver is the Spectre, it's kind of cool that he gets to take on different forms at different points in his life as Oliver Queen and as the Green Arrow. So that was kind of cool. We got to see him helping out Barry through spirit form, so to speak. So yeah, this was good. I really enjoyed this one a lot. So shortly after this scene, we see Barry run into Star Labs and he bumps into, you guessed it, the DCEU version of The Flash, played by Ezra Miller. And I have to say, whoever got Ezra Miller to appear for the Crisis crossover, hats off to them, and what a hell of a coup, because there was no rumour, there was no hint or even any indication that he was actually going to be appearing in the crossover. And what makes this moment even more bigger than it was already is that it's the first time ever that the Arrowverse and the DCEU have actually crossed over into each other. So to have the Arrowverse's Flash and the DCEU's Flash in the same room at the same time was absolutely incredible, and it was, no pun intended, a true meeting of two flashes. It was like flash of two earths. I mean, if there was ever a scene that brought the meaning flash of two worlds, it was definitely this one. This one was absolutely incredible. So our Barry, Earth One's Barry, asks the other Flash about the Speed Force, and the other Flash says, "The Flash what? The who what?" So it was really funny that the DCEU Flash has not got his name yet. He's not called himself the Flash yet, because if anyone who's watched the Justice League movie, he was never addressed as the Flash once. He was always just called Barry. So it's cool that hasn't got his name yet. So maybe, depending on what happens, maybe in his solo movie, maybe this will inspire him to take the name The Flash, unless they're going to reference his weird meeting with the Arrowverse's Flash, but time will tell. The other Flash asks Earth 1 Flash, "What the hell is this?" And Earth 1 Flash is saying to him, "I'm asking my same self that very question." And it's just absolutely wild. It's an absolute crazy question. And then the other Flash asks the Arrowverse Flash, is his costume cosplay, and does he want a selfie? And our Barry says, no, absolutely not. No, of course not. And where is here exactly? It's just really cool to see these two back and forth with each other. And Earth 1 Barry says it's a lot more complicated than that. And the other Flash says to Earth 1 Flash, "I like your suit. It looks very comfy." And Earth 1 Flash says to the other Flash, "Yeah, I like your suit too. It looks really cool and very safe." And very amazed, the other Flash says that Earth 1's suit looks very breathable. And then they both introduce themselves to each other, and they both say, "I'm Barry Allen." "No, I'm Barry Allen." And the other Barry asks, "What does that even mean?" It's just so crazy. And Earth 1 Barry says, "This should be impossible." And then they begin to ask each other questions about the other, and they end up not finishing the sentence. And then the other Barry pleads with Earth 1 Barry to not do this to him, and then he slowly starts to disappear. But before he actually disappeared, we actually got a Cyborg reference from him saying, "I told Victor this was possible." So it's possible, and I could be wrong. This is just a little theory. It's possible that the DCEU Flash may have time travelled back to the past. If you remember, in Dawn of Justice, we saw the Flash warning Bruce Wayne about Superman being a possible threat and Lois being the key. So he may have accidentally landed in the wrong timeline. Who knows, really? But I hope one day they might address that scene in a movie, or who knows. But I'd like to see that addressed at some point, because it just felt so random, but at the same time a lot of fun. So yeah, this was probably the most pleasant surprise of this part of the crossover, if not the entire crossover events. Probably even bigger than the Kevin Conroy cameo, because it was already announced that he was going to be appearing, but Ezra Miller was not even mentioned that he was going to be appearing in this. So mega props to the CW for bagging this little coup for the Crisis crossover event. And this scene with Grant Gustin and Ezra Miller, in my opinion, was a lot of fun and quite downright hilarious, in my opinion. Meanwhile, back on the planet Mountus, Kara finally catches up with Lex and asks him what he is doing. He replies by saying that he's doing what should have been done from the get-go, and that's getting the lay of the land, and he's looking for any potential hidden dangers, because they are, after all, in an alien world, and that any number of predators could be waiting to pounce. Lex then asks Kara if either her or Superman have ever even watched a movie to know this common sense stuff. Whether you like him or not, Lex has got a point. Kara warns Lex that she will figure out whatever he's planning and will stop him. Lex says, "I highly doubt that, because in a contest of mind and muscle, the mind wins every time. It depends, really. He tells Kara to ask him what he's up to. She acquiesces and she asks him just that, to which he replies that he's after universal domination and blasts her, thus knocking her out. He also mentions that he probably should have mentioned that he gave himself some upgrades when he used the Book of Destiny. So it looks like with the Book of Destiny, typical of Lex, he's given himself some superpowers, hence the word upgrades. So as usual, Lex has got his own agenda and is looking to take over the world, as usual. Typical Lex Luthor. Nothing ever changes. He can't be a team player for 5 minutes, can he? No, but in all seriousness, John Cryer absolutely kicks ass in this scene and in this whole crossover, in my opinion. Meanwhile, inside the Speed Force, Kate finds herself in a memory of Oliver's at Palmer Technologies, where the man in question is telling Ray Palmer that he didn't kill those people. Oliver then turns around after telling Ray that he has no idea what he's up against, and he notices Kate is in the corner and immediately asks her who she is. This was a nice scene, as it was a callback to season 3, I believe, of Arrow, seeing Ray and Oliver talking to each other. So this was a really cool scene and a nice callback to that particular moment. In another memory inside the Speed Force, we see a TV screen showing the Dominators on Earth 1, and the headline reads Invasion, which is a shout out to the first crossover events in the Arrowverse, where we see all of the heroes come together to stop an alien invasion. So that was a nice callback to that moment as well. John Jones finds himself in the memory where Oliver finds out about a multiverse existing and meeting Supergirl for the first time. And now, as we all know, the two are not off to a great start, but John tells Kara and Oliver about the Anti-Monitor and how the two of them will eventually become close friends. You know, that's one thing I'm a little bit disappointed about. I mean, we've always seen Flash and Arrow crossovers, but we never really got to see a Supergirl crossing over into the Arrow show. I would have liked to have seen that. Really big missed opportunity there, you know, especially they're considered to be the Trinity of the Arrowverse. I'm quite surprised we never got an Arrow Supergirl team up. I mean, we've had about, I think, maybe 2 crossover team ups with Supergirl and the Flash, dozens with Arrow and the Flash, but never Supergirl and Arrow. A little bit surprised about that, but you know, it is what it is. But I would have liked to have seen that, at least for like 1 episode. Shame we never got that. Don't understand why. Meanwhile, back on the planet Maltus again, Ryan Choi wakes up after being knocked out by Lex and goes to check on Supergirl. She then checks on him to see if he's been injured with her X-ray vision and says he'll be fine as there is no broken bones. The two Paragons then talk about how much Lex is an asshat and that, knowing him, Kara thinks he will likely mess with Marnovu's experiments to alter history to his advantage. She then stops midway and asks Ryan if he has ever flown on an alien planet before. Ryan says nope, never flown period, and Kara tells him to not be nervous and they fly together. I'm just wondering, you know, they say Ryan Choi is a Paragon, but to be honest, really, doesn't really bring much to the table. I mean, we know he's going to become the Atom at some points down the road, but kind of would have liked to have seen him have some sort of proto-Atom suit, just something to have, you know, for the final battle, but he just wore like his normal clothes. You know, he didn't really contribute much. So I'm hoping that changes. Meanwhile, Barry continues working his way around looking for Oliver and the other Paragons, and he ends up in a moment that he did not participate in. He approaches Oliver, who remembers everything, and Barry confronts him and asks him why he would make a devil's bargain with the Monitor the year before. Oliver disagrees and explains that it wasn't a devil's bargain and that he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. Barry says that in choosing to save him and Kara from dying in the crisis, he lost his friends and his family and his life in the process. You know, I was wondering when Barry would eventually learn about the little deal that Oliver and Marnovu made at the end of the Elseworlds crossover event. So, It was interesting to see Barry's reaction, and it's what I expected really. He wasn't exactly happy about it, but that's the sort of sacrifices that Oliver is willing to make to protect his friends. So everything you're seeing here, you're seeing everything come full circle. Oliver explains to Barry that dying is the easy part, the dead are at peace, and the real heroes are the ones who have to keep going. So while Barry's still in the Speed Force, he interrupts a moment with Laurel Lance, that's the Earth 1 version, and John Diggle talking about the Canary legacy by Sarah's dead body. Barry touches Sarah's body and she wakes up, with Laurel saying it's a miracle, but Barry quickly whisks Sarah away at full speed. Barry then collects Jean and then Kate from where they were in the Speed Force, and then off they go. Yeah, that's kind of funny to see that moment with Sarah's body. I think that was in probably season 2, I believe. It looked kind of around that time because Laurel didn't get killed off till season 4, so I'm guessing it's probably around season 2, I believe, or season 3. It's somewhere around that time. Meanwhile, Lex shows up as Marnover is about to make his jump, and Lex tries to team up with him, for his own benefit of course, explaining about what could go wrong. Supergirl then shows up. Ryan gets Marnover out of the way so that Lex and Supergirl can fight. Ryan tries to convince Marnover that he cannot open the portal and pleads with him. On their way out, Marnover sees his wife unconscious on the floor. Ryan manages to convince Marnover not to go through his experiment as the cost would be too great. He then tells Kara and Lex they need to stop fighting, and Lex remarks how Ryan just ruined a perfectly good bad guy plan. So cheesy. Oh my god. The 7 Paragons and Oliver then end up on the Antimatter universe, home of the Anti-Monitor, where Barry has whisked all of them there. Ryan says it's impossible that they arrived here because he knows he got through Marnover and he didn't go through the experiment. However, we see the Anti-Monitor is there waiting for them. Is it just me, or does the Anti-Monitor look just like Apocalypse from the X-Men? You know, with the bald head and the blue tubes and that deep voice. You know, he looks just like a rip-off of X-Men Apocalypse. Sorry, I just had to say that, you know. I just had to get that out of the way because he does look just like him. He looks cool, don't get me wrong. He looks cool and scary, but yeah, he just looks like a rip-off of Marvel's Apocalypse, in my opinion. The Anti-Monitor tells the Paragons that some fates are inescapable and that they may have stopped one version of Marnover from going through the experiment, but that another version of him did go through with it. He then begins to unleash his army of shadow demons. Oliver then shows up and tells them to listen to him and explains that's why they were selected as Paragons. When Ryan says that he's still unclear what all of this means, Oliver explains that they are all powerful enough to hold the line to buy them the time they need to rebirth the universe. He explains that the dawn of time is the only place where all of this do-over can actually take place. He goes on to say that he will be the one to light the spark that they need to fan the flame. Lex asks how do they do that. Oliver replies that Lex will know when the time is. So this is all gearing up for the big moment now. So you can see where this is all going. The Anti-Monitor tells Oliver that it's too late and that after 10,000 years he will finally be victorious. Oliver says that he will not win and that he believes his entire life has prepared him for this fight. Oh boy, here we go. The Anti-Monitor says that all life ends and that only death is eternal. When he says that only he is eternal, Oliver takes off his hood and tells the Anti-Monitor, "We'll see about that." You know, I kind of like this moment. It kind of looked like a hold my beer sort of moment. So you can see that Oliver is getting ready to kick some ass. And, you know, all throughout the Crisis crossover, I know it's all about different Earths getting wiped out and stuff like that, but really if you look very closely, this is all about Oliver's final moment and for his final battle, and you can really see that coming to the front here. And it's a really cool moment, in my opinion, and probably the biggest moment of the Arrowverse. We then see Oliver and the Anti-Monitor engage in a fight. Now, you can call this the Spectre versus the Anti-Monitor, and as they're fighting, Oliver delivers quite possibly the most badass line you'll ever hear when he delivers the line, "You have failed this universe," and unleashes a surge of power. Their clash causes the spark to be provided, and it is up to the Paragons to fan the flame. They focus on hope, destiny, humanity, love, truth, courage and honour. The resulting blast makes the Anti-Monitor disappear. Yeah, this was not a big battle, but it was still a big moment to see Oliver turn into pure energy, so this was a lot of fun, and yeah, you could really see the budget is high for this one, in my opinion. It was a really cool moment, and it really delivered in a big way. With Oliver slowly dying, Barry and Sarah go straight over to him, and they see him laying there as he takes his final breath. And this moment was very emotional. I think this one had more of an impact than the first time Oliver died, because the first time round, when he died in part 1, it was more shocking, but this one I think had a much more bigger build-up, because Oliver became the Spectre, he helped all the Paragons, and he made the ultimate sacrifice in saving not only the entire universe, but also taking out the biggest villain ever. And, you know, Stephen Amell filmed this final scene because, as we all know, he's finished with Arrow now, he's done, and I kind of got that feel that Stephen Amell was saying goodbye, not just to the heroes and all the people he's worked with, but to the fans as well. So this was a really good moment, and you know, if not for Arrow, we probably wouldn't have had the Arrowverse, so lots of credit goes to Stephen Amell, but to everyone really. I felt that this moment should have had all of the heroes there. John Diggle should have been there as the Green Lantern. You know, there should have been so much more, but this was still a cool emotional moment, and yeah, this was really, really good. And as Oliver finally passes away, we look up to the sky and we see a new Earth is beginning to take shape, and as the new universe is growing, Oliver has finally died and at peace, and that's pretty much how part 4 of the Crisis ends really. And I have to say, part 4, very, very good. Lots of awesome callbacks to a lot of the previous seasons of Arrow. The final battle with Oliver and the Anti-Monitor, it was okay, but kind of wanted to see a bit more of a slugfest, but it was still a great moment. I felt the other heroes, the Paragons, I felt they were a bit useless, because I would have thought they would have joined in the battle as well. They just stood there and did nothing, but overall this was a really good episode, and this was a great, strong 4th part of the Crisis. So with that all said, I'm going to wrap this up now. I'm going to leave this here for all of you. What did you think of part 4 of the Crisis, episode 8 of Arrow? Did you think it was good? Did you think it delivered? How did you feel about the way Oliver died? Do you think it was done well, or do you think it could have been done better? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will be back next time for the final part of the Crisis on Infinite Earths review series, and that is part 5, Legends of Tomorrow. So till then, take care everybody and stay safe. And also, the next time I'll be talking about Arrow will be episode 9, Green Arrow and the Canaries, so make sure you don't miss that.